Section 7.5. In this section, we're going to be talking about absolute value function. So the vocabulary for this section, we have absolute value. The absolute value is written, you may have seen it before, as just two parallel lines with a number in between. It may be the number -5, it might be the number 5, it might be an operation, so 6 minus 8 could be inside these absolute values. The definition of an absolute value is the number's distance away from 0 on a number line. So what this does is it gives the size of the number, whether it's positive or negative. All right, and we'll be looking at an example where that might be relevant here in a minute. When we're just talking about numbers, positive or negative, so we would write -5 here on a number line as 5 away from 0. So if this was 0, then -1 would be here, -2, -3, -4, -5. Absolute value does is it just talks about this distance. All right, so the opposite or absolute value of -5 is just going to be 5. The absolute value of +5 is also going to be 5 because that is 5 units away from 0. Just the same as -5 is 5 units away from 0. So there's two ways you can think about it. One, you can think about its distance from 0, which will always give you the correct answer. And two, you can just think if the number is negative, it goes positive. If the number is positive, it stays positive. Absolute value is always a positive number. And so here, the absolute value of 6 minus 8 would be the absolute value of -2, because 6 minus 8 is -2, which would just be 2. All right, so let's look at a application of this. So Cal and Al both live 3.2 miles from school, but in opposite directions. If you assign a number 0 to the school, you can show that Cal and Al live in opposite directions from it by positive 3.2 miles to Al's house and negative 3.2 miles to Cal's house. For both Cal and Al, the distance from school is 3.2 miles. So even though we're going one way to Cal's house and one way to Al's house, and you might express that on a number line as negative movement to Cal's and positive movement to Al's, distance is never negative. All right, but distance is often found by subtracting, which sometimes gives a negative result. So for that reason, we deal with absolute values that turns those numbers into the same positive number. So we would talk about the distance from Cal's house being the same as the distance from Al's house as both 3.2. So if we try some problems here, the absolute value of 5 plus the absolute value of -5. Well, the absolute value of 5 is 5, plus the absolute value of -5 is also 5, and 5 plus 5 is 10. 2 times the absolute value of 17. Well, the absolute value, or of -17, excuse me, the absolute value of -17 would be +17. And then we are also going to add 3 to that. So 2 times 17 is going to give us a positive 34 plus 3. 34 plus 3 is going to give us 37. All right, so we kind of treat these a little bit as parentheses. We want to go to them first and take those. If there's a negative number inside the absolute value, we'll make it positive. If there's an operation inside the absolute value, then we'll do that operation and continue with our problem. And finally here we have the absolute value of -4, which would be 4, divided by the absolute value of 4, which would be 4, which would give us 4 over 4, or 1. For class, why don't you try D, E, and F. Get your answers down in your notebook, and any questions or concerns you have about absolute value in your question box, and be ready for class with that.